Great. So everybody, thank you very much for joining today's first ever What Makes You Tick live sessions. We're recording the podcast in a live, intimate studio setting here in Sigmoid HQ in Sandyford. And this is the first time I've had the opportunity to bring the What Makes You Tick podcast to a live audience. There's a lot of nerves, so you might hear it in my voice, but there's also a lot of excitement as well about what this morning has to offer. I've got two incredible guests with me, and we're going to talk about performance, about high performance, about peak performance, and how it relates to both sport and business. But also we're trying and deep dive into what peak performance means individually, to get a kind of like a sense that you don't always have to be the high achieving sports star, or you don't always have to be the high achieving CEO. You may be a single parent running a household. That's also a sign of high performance and peak performance. So we'll get into that. We'll talk for about 40 minutes or so, and we will have a Q&A at the end, which will be quite exciting. And it is fitting for us to be here at Sigmoid HQ, which is a perfect location for events, for anybody who's looking to do kind of corporate events or any kind of intimate team building activity. But it's more that when myself and Dave and Rob sat down and we spoke about trying to collaborate and create something together, it was very much in the sense that this space is there to be used, and it's to be used in a way that will try and drive more usage, but also create really good conversations and really good activities. Today is one of those activities coming to life. So I would like to welcome this lovely intimate group of people to the session. I would also like to welcome my two fantastic guests for joining me. We have Jessica Patton, who has been on a very, very interesting journey of performance over the last number of years. Your journey to peak performance kind of began with professional dance and then transitioned into the world of CrossFit, which I think a lot of us can say is quite impressive. You've built your confidence and your self-belief through those activities. You're now head of marketing at Perpetua Fitness. So you've not only done the training aspect and been a head coach to so many people over the years, but you're also now head of marketing and you're telling the story for CrossFit. So welcome on board. Thank you for being here. And then we also have Darren O'Reilly, who is a founder of Supp, which is a nutritionally complete protein supplement. Darren has played his part in the world of peak performance as well, having been a professional rugby player with Leinster and Harlequins, then transitioned into the corporate world as a global director in digital transformation. And it was at this point that he found real insight and an opportunity to create something in Supp that will help people perform to their best levels. After losing about 20 kgs, you then, finding that you were missing all this kind of nutritional support as an athlete, you created Supp with Dr. Brian Carson. And now with this nutritional product, you're trying to bring it to the world and bring it to the masses. So thank you for being here.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Ross. So
as we talk about peak performance and high performance, actually, first of all, how are you all? I'm getting straight into the questions, but actually, how are you? Are you doing okay?
Yeah, all good. Nice and early this morning.
Didn't have far to come?
No, didn't have far to come, thank God.
Good.
Yeah, good, thanks. Excited for this morning. Going to be an interesting conversation. I think we can go deep, which will be good.
Hopefully, yeah. Now you can go as deep as you want now and be as intimate as you want here when it comes to some of your experiences and stories. But I've heard this phrase before, and maybe some of you guys have heard it as well. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's a phrase that, for me, what it tells me is that it encourages you to push yourself to a certain limit and beyond, and then when you reach that limit, it essentially becomes your foundation for the next time you challenge yourself. Jess, let's kind of kick off with you, and let's talk about, in your view, under the theme of peak performance, what does that mean to you, or how would you describe that, your own experience?
I suppose for me, it's more of like a mental state rather than an actual physical state. It's not an actual time in your life where you're performing to like your max. It's more of like those ongoing habits that you have daily that get you there. For me, I know obviously my background is CrossFit. I've been coaching for a long time, so I see it in other people as well. It's more of if I have a competition coming up, it's not that I leave everything to the last minute. It's always making sure that I am consistently chipping away daily, having those goals, yeah, but it's also those mini goals along the way that keep you going. So yeah, that's how I see it.
When you look at the mini goals that you're setting up, because sometimes it's hard to kind of see any improvement, especially when you look at kind of the small goals. Could you give us an example of what those type of small goals would be, or those mini goals? Because ultimately, over time, then they compound into this super response, or super performance.
Yeah, so I suppose like to put things into context, like back in January actually I fell. I got ACL reconstruction in February, and one of my goals obviously was for me to get back into my sport. And those little goals that I have was I need to get my knees straight. I need to really focus on working on that plyo stuff to get me back to running. And it's not something that running seemed so far away at the moment. And it was always just making sure that I was chipping away, doing my rehab daily. And there were those little things that were to get me there. And I know eventually I will get there. It's not happening right now, but I know if I stick with it and just keep chipping away daily, I will get there eventually.
Thank you. That's a lovely setup there with Siri. But to your point there about getting there and getting the knees, you're saying that things aren't necessarily where you want them to be right now. So, like, what's not there? Because it is a process. When it comes to physical injuries, we can see the changes and we can see the kind of improvements in straightening your leg. It's very different to our mental injuries.
Yeah.
So in terms of what's not there at the moment, what?
Yeah, so like if you think about it, like with peak performance comes with a lot of characteristics in that person, and I suppose belief is one of them, making sure that you have a plan that you're sticking to and just being consistent and also being adaptable. And I just feel like sometimes when you are really focused on that end goal, you can miss out on those little things that you're working towards, or those little daily habits that it's not just about ticking a box, it's actually making sure that like you are things are meaningful to get you towards that goal.
Are you kind to yourself during this process?
Yeah, I do feel so. Sometimes it is quite hard. You get a bit of like, I'm not doing enough, and you just need to be a little bit reassured, and that comes with maybe a little bit of lack of self-belief with it as well, and that can transfer over into anything. If you're starting a new job, it's always just making sure that you do have the inner foundations first, that being that self-belief, making sure that you're adaptable, making sure that you're like living towards your values as well, and being that the person that you are, and just making sure that, you're just believing in yourself.
I think to that point, having those values and that kind of social contract with yourself is very important, so that when you look in the mirror, that you're proud of your of how you're approaching something. Darren, when it comes to creating that peak performance kind of environment, how important is it to have the right people in your corner to help you get to that kind of high standard?
It's everything. You got to surround yourself with the right people. From just kind of like what Jess was saying there, consistency over a period of time will equal mastery. So nothing's going to happen right away. But if you don't have the correct support network with you, so whether that's being a team environment or your friends and peers, you end up not being able to live to those standards. But like some of trying to get to those standards, it's clear that it needs to be hard work, because everybody has to work hard, because nothing comes easy. But you also need to have a lot of humility, be able to listen to people, be able to trust the people around you, so that you're able to get to that performance that you want to, or your goal that you want to get to. And then ultimately you need to have a very curious mind. So if whatever got you here isn't going to get you there, so that's a phrase we use in our team all the time. So as much as we've done now, it's not going to be what's going to get us to the next position. So having that curious mind, being able to have the right people around you, but also be able to listen to people when they're giving you advice, or ask the right questions. Because if you don't ask those questions, you're never going to be living that kind of high performance lifestyle.
sometimes when you see people who are super overachievers and they're reaching, or they're performing at such a high level in sport or business, it can sometimes feel unattainable to a person starting off. For example, I set up my own consultancy last year, and scares the living Jesus out of me. But in saying that, I know that I have kind of a good network, I've got a good support system, but to where I want to get to feels like a million miles away. What do you say to kind of people who are either starting their kind of their own existing training journey, or even in the world of business?
Yeah.
What do you say to people who are striving to get to that level?
Yeah, you're just going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. Like, this idea of being high performance all the time is just unrealistic. What you see online, or what you see at the end outcome, is months or years of failure, and then you end up getting to the point where you want to be. We have a phrase in the office. It's kind of like fail, learn, move on. But the big key part is not being afraid to fail, but understanding how you learn from it, and then implementing those learnings, how you move on. It's quite easy for us because we're 90% a digital business. So we can see how people react to everything online, what clicks work, etc. So we do weekly sprints, but I'd say 90% of the stuff that we do, we fail. And that's fine. We just need to learn from it and just move on. And having that environment, but that's when you're talking about environments and surrounding yourself with the right people, you got to have people with that same mindset. So we're all laser focused on a product and an outcome. The outcome is getting new customers and then retaining them, ensuring that we give them great customer service. But to get to that point, there's a lot of failure. Like, you may look at from the outside of many businesses going, wow, they're getting all these accolades, they're doing really well. But the truth of the matter is, it's the swan mentality. Looks beautiful gliding along the top, paddling a fuck underneath.
Yeah. And would you say the same in the world that you're in, within the world of CrossFit?
Yeah.
Like, the environments that you guys have created.
Yeah.
How does that kind of how does the people, like, what standards or what foundations have you guys put in place to ensure that you're getting the best out of people?
Yeah, so I always feel like CrossFit is always built on the foundations of the community. And we, in our gym, we always make sure that we do community events. We get everyone together outside the gym. It doesn't even have to be in the gym. And just making sure that there's something special about doing, say, going to a group class. You're doing your own individual workout, but you're training beside other people. And that really does motivate you. You may not see it at the time, but like, when you're finished, you're like, God, they suffered just as much as I did. Or like, if you're in a team, we're all working towards the same thing together. And it's just more of a, like I said, like a motivation. But community, yeah, it's huge, especially in our environment that we have, and even in that working environment. We always make sure that, for example, our coaches, we have coaches development meeting every single week. We're all on the same page and we're moving forward together.
Love it. To create kind of like the solid foundation, nutrition is obviously massively important, right? There's all these other aspects with sleep, with movement and all that, but having created and founded Supp, Darren, and given your experience in the world of the corporate world, moving from sports to becoming a corporate, becoming a director in digital transformation, how important is nutrition from your experience, and why did you create Supp? What was the gap you saw?
Yeah, great question. So probably the reason why I created was I lost 23 kilos in weight. It wasn't on purpose. Quite enjoyed being kind of the chunky monkey in the room. But when you move from a professional sporting environment, most of the time, unless you're one of the top internationals, you go in and at the bottom, and you're starting from the very start again. So I was trying to climb the ladder as fast as I can, because that's just the way my nature is. I just want to try to get to the top. But in that process, I had very bad behavioural patterns. So I was either just having a coffee in the morning for my breakfast, or if I was lucky, I'd have a croissant hanging out of my mouth when I was running into the office. And this was consistent. And then at lunchtime, I'd have a meal deal, which is cheap, convenient, but nutritionally disastrous. But during that period of time, I looked at what's going on around the office, and everybody else was doing the same thing, wanting to try maximise their lunch hour by going to the gym or going for a walk, or trying to live a healthy lifestyle but making poor food choices. So what we were doing with Supp was We just want to have the foundation sorted. So with our product, you get everything you need. So the 13 superfoods and 31 gram plant-based protein, but there's also the vitamins and minerals. But why we created it ultimately was to give people a lifestyle supplement that can support them on their busiest day. So instead of skipping breakfast, which is not good for people, even people might disagree, but it's basically you want to have your foundation set so that you're able to excel throughout the day. So this is just an option. And thankfully, we've been well received so far. We're still very early in our journey, but touch wood, we can continue and in the road that we're going.
Yeah, good. And it's also, so nutrition being one aspect, then movement and sleep and all the other elements to help you, because like you can't perform on an empty tank, right? No. You know, or you could do it for such a small period of time and then you're goosed and then you're burnt out and then all of a sudden then mindset could be completely different.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate that into the world of CrossFit, but also now that you're head of marketing for CrossFit, right?
Yeah.
You've got to balance not only staying fit, coming back from training or coming back from an injury, but you've all these other elements or all these other plates spinning as well.
Yeah.
What's your kind of approach to it?
I suppose for me, it's just focusing on, if you think about training and nutrition, it's more about like not trying to do everything all at once, and like even just picking one or two things, like at the start of the week or even at the start of the month, I try pick, right, I'm really going to focus on my sleep this month and I'm going to make sure I'm getting 8 hours, because as we all know, we don't really function that well on 4 hours of sleep. So just making sure that we pick a goal or two. For me, I always just make sure that I'm moving for at least an hour a day. And that's all you need. Like, you don't need to be training for 2 hours a day to be seeing results. I know some people see that. But also as well, I do think lately, I suppose with social media and stuff, there is a bit of a social pressure with like, you need to do a run in the morning and then you need to go do a gym session in the evening. And I do think that's coming from people with like full-time jobs. That's probably not necessary. If you're getting up at 5 o'clock, yeah, you may get your run in. And then if you go to the gym in the evening, you'll probably get that session in. But like, where do you have time to socialize? Where do you have time for you time? And for me, I know I'm not one to arrive 5 minutes before a meeting or 5 minutes before my session. Like, I like that blank space in the morning, and I will get up half an hour earlier if that means that I have me time before I go into my session or before I go into work. And I feel like that blank space or that white space is really important as well for peak performance, because it's all about like self-development, giving yourself time to think about, right, what am I actually doing next, and just being present. One of the distractions I feel at the moment, or one of the barriers, I suppose, with peak performance is distraction. And it's more about, I need to focus on where I am right now and what I can do in that moment.
I find that when I'm in the middle of a task, that say if you're working on a project or something, or even setting up this, all of a sudden you get a text message, all of a sudden you get a notification, all of a sudden a butterfly floats across the, like there's so many different things that can kind of distract you. When you talk about that blank space, in theory it sounds great, right? But, and it kind of, for some people it's meditation, for others it's going for a walk. Like, if you don't get that blank space, does it affect you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm behind myself the whole day. And it's especially in the morning time. Like for some people, like if I'm saying, obviously this works for me, but what works for me may not work for you. Like I get up at 5:30 pretty much every morning, whereas I know for other people, if they get up at 5:30, they crash and burn by 11 o'clock. And so I suppose the things that we're talking about here doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for Darren or for you. Like, it's more about just finding what works for you and moving forward from there.
It's funny you say that, Jess, and in 100% agreement with you. I've started doing this by, not on purpose, but I get up an hour earlier every morning, and it's not about trying to look at my emails, look at anything like that. I just need an hour of myself, so to get up an hour before I go to the gym. But all I do is write the day's tasks or what I want to achieve. But if you compound that extra hour earlier over the course of a year, that gives you 15.9 days back. So it's incredible what you can do with small behavioral patterns. So just a small task, again, 1 hour for yourself will give you 15 days over the course of a year. So like, just think about how much that can compound of good behavior. That's exactly what you say. I need that. And it's not about going on my phone. It's actually trying not to, but just writing down a few tasks of what I want to do, and then I go train, and then I feel great, and that's just my routine.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? 15 days, right? Like when we look to take our holidays, it takes typically a week to nearly switch off from the job, and then a week then to come back into being a human again, and being yourself. But if you look at that 15 days by simply doing an hour or so a day, like when you put it into that kind of context, that's massive. Like what would you do now in 15 days if you had it completely to yourself? I'd say we'd all probably approach things a little bit differently. But with that being said, right, I think there's also a point to, if you don't get that hour a day, right, and I was listening to saying that like it does affect the rest of your day if you don't have that blank space of that hour. Back to my point about being kind to yourself, you mightn't get it every single day, but to know that you're at least trying to, or that you have a non-negotiable that you're getting it at least 4 times a week,
Yeah.
And that if you miss one session, or if you miss 1 hour, if you miss one blank space, that you don't need to beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
There's a fine line there, right?
Yeah, there is, especially like obviously getting up early is a big commitment if you especially do have a long day. But like if there's a day I need a lie in because I know I need that sleep, I'm going to take it because I'm probably going to be a better person for it tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, like that. So I have a question here, and it kind of starts off that we're not robots, right? It's impossible to be at the top of your game every single day, and you touched on it a little bit earlier on. Can either of you actually remember a time in your life that might necessarily be in the world that you're in right now, but it could be back when you were younger, it could be, I don't know, but where you weren't reaching the standards that you actually set, where you weren't actually proud of what you were trying to do, and how you identified it and how you actually overcame it to get yourself back on track? Because I find sometimes that if there are moments throughout the year, maybe it's during the dark days or whatever, and the short days, but there are moments when I find it very hard to get up in the morning. I find that I mightn't necessarily train as well as I would like. I mightn't have the right habits. I mightn't be eating nutritionally well, and maybe there's things happening in the background that are affecting me. Has anything like that happened to you guys, and how have you gotten yourself back on track? Who wants to take that first? Go on, Darren.
So basically this happens on a weekly basis. Like, let's be honest, it's impossible to be at that level all the time. But you also got to be able to realize, okay, what are the non-negotiables? So for example, I have at 4 o'clock every day, I have 30 minutes blocked into my diary where I just go for a walk. And that's just to clear the head and then get back into things. So like nobody on earth can say that they're at a high performance all the time. And this idea that people are going to be peak performing consistently all the time is just social media or LinkedIn. It's just where people are able to give self-gratification of what they're doing. But what I think is really important is when you have set goals, or when you have an objective that you're aiming for, you're striving to, even if you don't hit it, it's what you do in between the start and the journey to get there. Because if nothing's sure, it's not going to be linear. It's going to be up and down. There's going to be loads of failures. There's going to be loads of highs and lows. But take note of the high parts of what actually went wrong. Understand why the low part is, and surround yourself with the right people. Trace from our team here is here in the room. She'd probably be able to tell you on a daily or hopefully not daily, but regularly enough, she'd know how my mood is or where I am in headspace. And like when you're trying to lead a team, you got to be the front all the time. You have to try put a brave face on, but also you got to be humble enough and vulnerable enough to go, well, I'm not having a great day. Things aren't working out. We lost a pitch here, and you just got to park it, move on, and look at the bigger picture of where you want to bring the business or bring the team with you. But I think that's being comfortable, being uncomfortable as well.
I feel for me in that experience of a bit of a challenge was, I suppose the easiest thing to say would be my injury, but I'm actually pretty proud of how I dealt with that. But in terms of a bit of a challenge, it probably would have been when I transitioned from a coach into that marketing role that I'm currently in. It was more, I'm not great with change. So it was more of a big routine shift for me. Although I'm still in the same environment, I'm still around the same people. I felt, like you said, I was completely out of my comfort zone. Although, like, I have a business degree, I know I've since upskilled in marketing, but at the time I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Bit of imposter syndrome. I was like, why did they pick me? I had no self-belief, and I suppose the last year I've just really worked on building that up. Like, I love a challenge, so it's all about, for me, upskilling and it's not always going to be handed to me. Like, the work isn't always going to be a challenge for me, but I always seek to find that. What can I do? Where can I improve here? I always ask for feedback, and I suppose that's really important.
When you were making that change and the lack of self-belief, why did you not believe in yourself?
I suppose because I was so comfortable where I was in coaching, and it was just, I hadn't, so it's been 4 or 5 years since I'd done my business degree. So obviously things weren't as fresh as they would have been as a graduate coming out of college. I was also looking at other people in my course, and I was like, they've now finished their graduate course or their graduate program. They're now in full-time positions, and here I am as a coach, and I'm just starting out at entry level now, basically, in a career that I may pursue. And it was quite scary for me. And I suppose being in the gym, I wasn't surrounded by people who were going to help me upskill in marketing, because everyone's coaches around there. We run a great gym, but marketing wouldn't have been our forte. So I was basically leading the way there, and I was like, I'm not the right person. But eventually I found my way. I did as many courses as I could. I went to seminars, webinars. I just tried to upskill as much as I could. And I suppose that's just a bit of advice, is if you are feeling like that, do what you can. Like, no one's going to hand it to you on a plate. You have to go find it.
It's interesting you say that, because, say, from the outside looking in, as while you were a coach, and I think through social media, we see this persona, and we see this person who's super fit. You're actually marketing yourself in a way to get yourself to a certain level of prominence within the world of fitness, right? Yet you don't see that as marketing, right? Yet you don't see that as a way of promoting yourself and all the good stuff that you've done there. We're very quick to kind of go back into what we don't know instead of nearly doubling down on what we do know. Because how many people have been through performance conversations in business, and we talk about the weaknesses, and you need to develop your weaknesses, you need to work on your weaknesses, instead of actually knowing that not everybody is a hunter, not everybody's a gatherer, not everybody's business, not everybody's marketing, knowing that your skill set is focused in one particular area, and double down and be unbelievable at that. So, like, it's I suppose it's interesting to see that you would be seen as a high performer and living in a peak performing world, yet your own view of where you were going into this new challenge didn't place you in that mindset.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the individual, because we see people as high performers, but we only see them at the iceberg level, you know. We only see at the top, as you talk about the swan. We don't see what's going on behind it, or what's going on in our heads. But high performance isn't just about business. It's not just about sport or health. High performance is also about how single parents run families, how parents run families of 4 or 5 kids, trying to keep the business going, as well as maintaining connection with their family and friends. What do you say to people who are in that type of environment, who don't necessarily have any ambition to become CEOs, who aren't necessarily interested in being the fittest person in the world, but they still need to run the 9 to 5s, the Monday to Fridays, and then become taxis for their kids at the weekend, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think from being in high performance sports teams to the corporate world, there's massive transferable skill sets. But one thing that I was struck by was, when I moved into the corporate world, I didn't understand how people could clock in and clock out and not want to strive to be the best. I was like, that was a serious adjustment. But until I realized that what you see on the surface, so this is all about trying to get to know your team. So what you see on the surface level of somebody clocking in or clocking out, you got to understand that they have a whole other life outside of the 4 walls of your office. So if they're coming in and they're doing an unreal job between 9 and 5, but they leave at 5:01, that's perfectly fine. And you reward them for that, and you find what makes them tick, as you say. So if that's monetary reward or if it's time reward, because the one thing that nobody gets is time. And then you have another person in the team that's just really wants to get promoted and to keep striving, and that's okay too. But ultimately, high performance is a mix of all sorts of different skills, but you got to find out what works for each individual in your team. So if it's somebody, I think, I use this example a lot. I think probably the highest performing people I know are people who have a number of kids, either a single parent or in a team. It's being able to get to work, turn up, perform, get back, maybe go to the gym or maybe training for a 10K run or a 5K run, and do that consistently whilst also keeping their family happy and their partner happy. Keeping your family is one thing, but then keeping your partner happy as well, and then trying to socialize with friends. So it's like you're spinning a number of plates, but I think it's trying to realize that not everybody is the same, and not everybody's going to be motivated or feel at a high performance level by the same triggers. So you just got to get to know people on an individual level, and each person is different, and it's okay to be different.
Yeah. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back then to the characteristics that we spoke about, and like whether it's sport, business, or just life, they all carry across. So having like belief in yourself, just having a bit of a plan, like you said, like I suppose peak performance is not something that you clock in and clock out of. It's not a switch that switches on and off. It does transfer over. So yeah.
I wouldn't think that I'm living in a peak performing life at the moment, but it was funny. One of the guests here, Emer, and I went to a Wim Hof session last year, and pal of mine, Logie, he was like, "Listen, Steve, you're basically you're doing all these different things, like to your point, Darren. You're spinning all these plates. When do you get time for yourself?" And I was driving to Limerick, and I said, "I'll have 2 hours in the car. I'll be grand, right?" And I wasn't actually I was kind of trying to do a lot of things. There was a lot of change in my life at that time, and there was a lot of uncertainty, and he suggested go to Wim Hof, and I went down and did the whole breathing session, and I did the ice baths, and we had Neil Averku from Breathe with Neil on the podcast. But what was very, very interesting is that it was at a moment in time where I was trying to get to a stage where it was like reset, and I was speaking to him earlier on about it, and like that chance to breathe, that white noise, that space where you were surrounded in a really good environment, in an environment that was super kind of open and welcoming. There was no judgment. It was quite a unique space because you're kind of always on when you're in work or when you're online and stuff. So we got a chance to be myself. And then from that made all these decisions that have since affected my life, and they've nearly been like the butterfly effect to where we are now. What is your take on not necessarily peak performance, but the commonality between peak performance and also just doing your best? What's your kind of thoughts around that? Because are they not the same?
I do feel like with peak performance, obviously everyone thinks of like this high performance level, like you're performing at your best, but it's also about just showing up as your best self every day and doing what you can to get there. I know for myself, if one thing is off, whether it be training, my social life, nutrition, whatever it is, I'm not at peak performance. They all have to work together to get yourself there, and just be my best self, be the best version I can be every day. You spoke about habits and turning up. I suppose it's not going to happen if you just do it one day, right? Yeah. It's about that consistent point, and to your point, Darren, it's about returning that same approach day in, day out, or of 10 days you're doing it 8 days, of 20 days you're doing it 16 or 17 days, that you're actually creating these really good habits. What type of habits have you set up for yourself now, outside of the walks on a half an hour every 4 o'clock? But like, what kind of habits have you set up that you've seen a massive change that have helped you maintain a high level?
Yeah, so I think from the getting up an hour earlier every day, that's just a non-negotiable. Even it's probably annoying if you have a few beers, because you still get up automatically at whatever time, about 5 a.m., which is frustrating. But that's definitely one that's really helped. Goal setting. So trying to have like a target for the year for a business point of view, but then personally. So, for example, each quarter this year I have different fitness challenges. So from doing the CrossFit Open to doing triathlon to high rocks, etc. And that's just to mentally stay fit and focused on something, because they're kind of more short-term goals that you're able to get your teeth stuck into outside of work. Because as most early founders will tell you, it's all consuming, and your headspace is something that you need to really look after. And then probably as stress levels, and I think I said this to you before, but when stress levels go up and down, I do kind of different kind of breath work or meditation stuff to try keep the mind at bay. And that's just they're my sort of things that I do.
Jess, would you have something similar?
Yeah, pretty similar to that actually. So just one thing would obviously be me trying to move for at least 60 minutes a day. Not necessarily to like stay in shape or be fit. It's just more, that's me time.
Yeah.
And one thing would be that blank space I have in the morning. Like I said, like I'm not the best person if I don't get it. And then keeping on top of my food, I suppose a while back, and probably still is on social media, it's all about like, oh, you need to eat a certain way, maybe less is better. But at the moment, especially my training has always been about performance. It's never been about how I look. So it's always making sure that I'm fueled up for that. And then it wouldn't be every day now, but at least once a week I do try and upskill in a way. So a bit of self-development in terms of whether it be in my career, even just reading, it's like a couple of chapters of a book.
Yeah.
Listen to a podcast on the way home. I
know a fella.
Yeah. A while ago, I used to get so caught up in just listening to music on the way home. And there is a time and a place for that. But sometimes, like, you know what, I'll stick on a podcast today and just listen to what's going on in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get a couple of questions now, so get them ready. Logie, I'm looking at you. But in saying that, then when you do have that downtime, I think it's making sure that you're not hard on yourself, that you do just look after yourself. I think the habits that you're suggesting are quite important, in that we look at giving ourselves a little bit of free time, not being too hard on ourselves, but also setting standards for ourselves of what we want to achieve, and knowing that if we don't achieve it today, that we can have a cut at it tomorrow and hopefully perform that little bit better the next day. You spoke about your relationship with food and the fact that you don't train to look a certain way, but you fuel yourself in a way, and ultimately how we look then is as a result of what we're doing and how we train. For those who are having challenges on the food front, because educationally when it comes to training, a lot of people think that eat less and therefore I look great, whereas it's actually the opposite. It's just eat real, or get supplemented with the right foods, and then your body starts to be nourished. Like the way we'd put the best fuel into a car, you want to put the best fuel into your body, right? Yeah. Can you just talk to that a little bit about your experience in that front?
Yeah, so just going a little bit back. So obviously I had a year or two in dance college. Obviously that was probably one of the worst times I had with food. I was looking at myself every day in a mirror. It just wasn't for me. And that made me realise, like, I went to dance college to be a professional dancer. And from there, I realised this is not for me. And that's when I found CrossFit. And that was the first time I really felt fulfilled in my training. And I wasn't, one thing in a CrossFit gym they say is not to bring it back to CrossFit all the time, but they don't have mirrors, mainly because it's all about what your body can do, not how it looks. And I really liked that. And ever since then, I've worked with nutritionists over the years, mainly not to, like I said, look a certain way. It was to rebuild my relationship with food. I went through a bit of a phase of, eating less and just trying to control my food as much as I can. And it was only when I was put in that environment, like you said, Darren, about surrounding yourself with the right people. If I was training with someone and we were like, let's go get an almond croissant after this, I was like, if they can eat an almond croissant, I can eat an almond croissant, you know? Yeah. We're still working just as hard. And I suppose if people are having some challenges with food, I can only talk from my experience, but it's all about just surrounding yourself with the right people and really focus on what your body can do rather than how it looks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so we might, if there's any questions, has anybody any questions? Do you want to take them? Do you want to take the mic there, Logie? Come on, Logie, go on, take the mic. Yeah, we might as well. Yeah.
I said, obviously, you guys are very driven. Who has inspired you or supported you, and I suppose has driven you on? Is there anybody in your life that might have done that, or is there people that you look up to right now within the industry? Leave it up to both.
Yeah, so I suppose just coming from my parents, they're both business owners. My mom especially, she had me at a young age and she was self-employed from there. So I always looked up to her and how driven she was. And for my dad, he looked after us when my mom was in work. So I just saw that work ethic, and I suppose that transfers over. And when you're looking up to someone so much, you do end up becoming them sometimes in a way.
Yeah, mini versions of them.
Yeah, basically. So I suppose, my mom would be one in terms of her work ethic, her drive and motivation just to give everyone around her the best version of herself and give them a good life.
Sounds like a great team environment then as well, yeah. Darren?
Yeah, very similar at Chiefs. We were given a lot of freedom when we were younger, so our kind of first business was selling eggs to the butcher, local butcher. You probably wouldn't be allowed to do that now. Then my parents were really good role models. Both my older brothers are quite driven, so one of them, James, is living in New York, and his last business was on the stock exchange, so he got to be a paddy ringing the bell, which is kind of cool. And then my eldest brother is a kind of serial restaurateur, kind of Mad Egg and a few other businesses on the go. So that was always an idol, kind of looking up to them, seeing what they're doing. And then I have two mentors who are inside business. One's inside business, and then the other one is outside, and they've been really good just from a guidance and an opportunity to see how other people have done it and kind of being able to pick their brains.
Great. Anyone else? Any questions? Don't be shy.
Don't jump at once.
Don't be shy.
We don't bite.
Just a quick query, I suppose. How do you find a balance between consistency and goal orientation? Sort of like the big problem for me would be I'd be focused on a goal, like doing a triathlon or doing a 5K a day for May. But then when something like that falls away, then jumping back to just being consistent with day-to-day stuff. How do you find a balance in that? Might be a stupid question, I don't know.
No, it's great. So I think it's more about if you fall off, if you're not consistent, and then you go back into your day-to-day stuff. So how do you find a way to just fall back into reaching a high performance on your everyday activity? Is it? Yeah.
Sort of like doing your 5K a day or 5K 4 days out of the week or whatever it is to training for a triathlon or training for CrossFit games or rugby season or anything like that. So when those goals aren't there, how do you go back to just being consistent?
Oh, so without having a purpose, how do you maintain a high level of consistency? Okay, that's.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I suppose with me anyway, if I'm picking a goal, it's never something completely out there. It's always something that I'm interested in, that I'm just basically, obviously I really want to get to that goal, but it's also, I train every day. Do you know what I mean? And that's not something that's going to change. And sounds a bit cliche, but like with goals, I try to think of it as like nearly intentions. So yeah, I want to achieve that goal, but it's more of like an intention that I intend to live this way consistently. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're essentially, when you set yourself goals, you give yourself a purpose. So you might you might adjust your training.
Yeah.
But when you don't have a goal, your lifestyle is to train anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to have a goal to maintain that.
Exactly. It's great
lifestyle.
to have something out there and completely push you outside your comfort zone. But
Yeah.
I suppose those other goals that if you want to live consistently, just making sure that it does align with your lifestyle, one, and how you are and your values, two.
Yeah, and then maybe just to add to that, because I agree with everything you just said, maybe just to add to that, by having written out goals for the year, so and then breaking them down into sort of quarterly ones, because it just makes it a bit more tangible. Because the further something is away, the more chance it is of kind of deviating from what you're doing. But if you have something that's tangible within each 3 months, it kind of makes you more accountable. So that can be for business or for activity as well, I think.
Great. Anyone else? One more? Great.
I suppose you both kind of yourself starting a new business and then you jumping into that marketing role. How did you, suppose, manage to build the confidence to get rid of that imposter syndrome, and like what actions did you take to build that confidence?
I suppose the imposter syndrome never really goes away. So you're always kind of feeling very uncomfortable with what you're doing and the challenges that come up on day to day. We're fortunate in a position now that we have team members that are able to offset some of that risk of stuff that you don't know. I suppose at the start I double jobbed, so was still working for about 9 months, was developing and then launched the product and then moved into the business when we started getting traction. That just takes a bit of discipline, but it de-risks everything. So it's just all about de-risking a decision you want to do and then going after it. You can validate a lot of ideas fairly easy, particularly with the product that we have. It's kind of a food base, so you can go around getting tasting, sampling, doing all that sort of good stuff. But then any sort of idea, try to validate it and then just try to be all in on it after you back yourself, because what's the worst that can happen? You fail. Everybody fails every day. You just kind of get used to it and then you just dust yourself off and go again.
Yeah, I suppose for me it was more about being open to growth and just asking questions and like accepting. Like I suppose accepting was one of the hard things for me, knowing that like I'm not at my peak performance or like a high performance level at the moment, but I know I will get there if I make mistakes and then learn from them going forward.
I think that's really important, accepting that you don't necessarily know certain roles. And I think with what my own experience on that front is that when you're given a role to do, there's an expectation in your head that everybody thinks you know what to do and that you know exactly what's needed, whereas probably what's needed is you asking for help, and what's needed is you letting people know that you're not sure, so that you're managing their expectations of you, but also you're giving yourself the freedom to bring on support and bring on certain level of help. So to your point on imposter syndrome, I think everybody in this room is at some stage in their life has had it and probably has it at different stages of their life continuously. But being like the first sign of strength is asking for help. And I think that's across life and as well as in business, right?
And that goes back to the thing about being humble. You got to be humble enough to ask for help and being curious enough to be able to take the advice on board, because there's no way that you know everything. Nobody does. And that's why you get skill sets brought into businesses, or you ask mentors for help. And that's okay. And the more vulnerable you are, the more curious you are to learn from somebody else, the faster you're going to get to the destination you want to be.
Okay, so I think we're kind of coming. Oh yeah, we've one more question. Yeah, great. Very engaged audience. I love this.
So I used to be like you, Jess, in a sense. I was training every single day, and I would never change. Mm-hmm. But now as I get older, my energy levels have just naturally dropped. Throw in a few kids, and then my time has just been taken away from me. So now the force has been put upon me. I have to change. And so the question is, I feel I'm grabbing for those quick kind of bites that are so no nutrition in them, even like the protein bars and stuff. Is that where you feel like nutrition, even as you get older, is even more important to kind of keep those levels of energies and even fuel your motivation?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I suppose for me, I am obviously thinking about the long run, and if I set the foundations now and those consistent, like building up my nutrition now, that I know down the line, me as a person, I will tend to reach for those more nutritious foods, just from the education that I've obviously had being as a coach and seeing other people. We work with a lot of professionals in the gym, business owners. They're in at 5:45 a.m. They're out at 7 to bring their kids to school. And I personally feel with those guys, it's their lifestyle, and they really work towards that high performance state. And it's those characteristics in them that bring out the best in them.
I always just add to that, I agree with everything you said. I think ultimately, unfortunately, as our bodies get older, they're going to get a little bit, you got to start training for where you are in life as well. And it's funny, we have a lot of new parents taking our product, and the first thing you notice with a new mum or dad, they're forever looking after the new baby, but they forget about looking after themselves. And it's really prevalent because they're so focused on raising a child and looking after them, and they start forgetting about themselves. So ultimately, if you look at the foundations of how you're fueling yourself, so if you're fueling yourself for the day ahead, go back to basics. Make it really simple. Whatever's going to work that you can do consistency Monday to Friday, just say, take it in the working week. That'll end up giving you more energy. But start with your morning meal. Most people, particularly in Europe, we don't get enough protein in the morning and are afraid of carbohydrates. So try get fibre and protein in, and you'll feel a little bit better, I think.
Also for me as well, I know come the evening time, like I really don't want to make my dinner, and I now work with Parallel Nutrition meals, and even those ready meals, if you work with the right company, there's a lot of Irish companies out there, even the HelloFresh, they're great for just having the stuff there. All you have to do is heat it up, and you basically have everything you need all in one meal as well. So those ready meals are there to use, and I think there's a right time and a place for them too.
It's good that you're asking the question though, because you're obviously quite aware of it and you can see a difference, you know. And I think, listen, we've a little one on the way. I haven't a clue what it's going to be like, but I've no doubt I'll be asking everybody for tips about how to get my time back. But listen, on that note, I think it was a really, really interesting discussion. Thanks everybody for the questions. Darren and Jess, thank you both very much for being so open and honest and being kind of really clear on what it means to live high performing and to maintain a peak performance lifestyle. I think there's some great nuggets in there. There's a lot to take from it. Hopefully we'll take it and apply it to our own lives in whatever way and whatever capacity we can. I'd also just like to take a moment to thank Rob and Dave from Sigmoid HQ, who have kindly provided the event space for us to have this live session. I'm very proud to be partnered with the team here, and I know it's an ideal space for any corporate or any event that you're looking to create. I know the guys would only be delighted to speak to you if there's something coming up in the future. I'd also like to thank Social Plug and Ron and his team for recording the live session and putting such a professional touch to the sound and to the video. And anybody who's taking photos or anything like that, please do promote this on your social media. What makes you tick? Tag us, tag the team here. And thank you very much for just being part of this. I know it's early in the morning. I hope you've all gotten something from it. And thanks a million for being here. Thank you.